My name is Royce Mercer. I'm not a whistleblower. I'm not some ex-military burnout chasing ghosts. I was a government contractor, under a program that doesn't officially exist. And for 20 years, I hunted things this country won't even admit are real. Let me tell you something up front. I didn't come here to scare you. I came to finally speak the truth. Because for 2 decades, my silence was bought with an NDA thick enough to choke a horse. I couldn't tell my wife. Couldn't tell my brothers. I couldn't even write it in a damn journal. But that agreement expired last month. To the day. And the first thing I thought when I woke up that morning was that it's finally time someone knew what we were actually up against. I'm talking about things older than borders. Things that were never meant to be cataloged. Creatures with biology that spits in the face of science and instincts sharper than any man I ever served with. We didn't just track anomalies, we were sent to contain them or terminate them before the public ever saw so much as a footprint. And 90% of the time, we could do that. Because even monsters bleed. But there was one job, one thing, that didn't follow the rules. We were sent into a dead zone tucked inside the Bitterroot Range, western Montana, early September 2003. Officially, it was classified as an environmental hazard zone. Unofficially, it was known as Grid 24, Red Level Territory. Let me explain something. If a mission came down marked Red Level, it meant no evac plan, no air support, and no guarantee they'd even come looking for your body. We were a 6-man team, Tier 1 backgrounds, hand-picked over years of operations. Each of us had logged over a dozen cryptid suppressions. We knew how to move, how to think ahead, how to survive off-script. But Grid 24 changed everything. This wasn't a clean kill order. This was retribution. Something had taken down a drone station and 2 recon squads before us. And the footage that did make it out, let's just say it wasn't our animal behavior. It was strategic. But they never told us that. What they gave us was a bloodless map, a list of containment objectives, and enough tranquilizer to put down an elephant herd. They didn't tell us it could speak. They didn't tell us it was nesting. And they sure as hell didn't tell us it remembered faces. I've got 17 confirmed biological kills on record. 17 things that should have never existed outside of legend. But only one of them called me by name. And I still don't know how. I'm telling this story now because someone needs to carry the warning. Because something we were sent to bury didn't stay buried. It let me live. And for the life of me, I still don't understand why. 4 men went in with me. 3 came out in bags. 1 never came out at all. And me? I crawled to the evac point with 1 lung collapsed, part of my calf missing, and 38 stitches holding my neck together. They told the press it was a grizzly attack. They even released fake ranger reports to cover it up. But grizzlies don't open up corpses and remove the spines. You want to know if cryptids are real? I used to ask that too. Then I watched something rip through body armor like paper and then use the radio to speak back to us. I've waited 20 years for this moment. To speak freely. To stop pretending I'm not still hunted every time I close my eyes. I don't care if you believe me. Belief doesn't make a thing real. But if you've spent enough nights in the woods, you already know. There are sounds that don't belong. There are tracks that don't match anything in the books. And sometimes, the silence doesn't mean it's safe. It means it's already too late. So, listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you is exactly what happened. No dramatics, no embellishment, just the mission, the team, and the thing that tore through us like we were made of leaves. Subscribe to this channel if you want the truth. MindFuel isn't here to entertain. We're here to remember what the world forgot and what's starting to come back. You might be wondering how a guy like me ended up in this line of work. It wasn't some heroic decision. It wasn't patriotism. It was desperation. I enlisted in the Marines straight out of high school, 1995, infantry, 1st Battalion, forward deployed to Okinawa. I did well, moved up fast. But I didn't have the temperament for politics or for officers who earned their rank in classrooms. Let's just say there was an incident, one I'm not proud of, and it earned me a dishonorable discharge. No pension, no clearance, no second chance. By the time I was 27, I was broke, angry, and living out of a converted cargo van behind a shooting range in Idaho Falls. Then one day, a guy in a suit knocked on the side panel. Didn't say who he worked for, only that he had access to my file. Said he was building a rapid response unit for domestic threats. Didn't blink when I asked what kind. Just handed me a one-page contract and said, "If you can keep your mouth shut and follow orders, you'll never worry about money again." I looked down at the paper. No logos, no header, just a title line. Biological Containment of Undocumented Species. I thought it was a joke. Maybe some kind of black bag training program. But I signed anyway. Hell, I figured, if they were lying, what did I really have to lose? They flew me to a facility in northern Nevada. Desert compound, buried into a hillside, hidden under the name of a decommissioned mining company. No welcome speech, no insignias. Just training, day after day. High-angle rescue, extended field survival, tracking techniques I'd never even seen in recon, and they ran us through these weird scenario drills, like how to clear a tree line when the enemy doesn't use paths, or how to stay silent when you're being stalked by something with more than one set of lungs. I didn't ask questions. Not until the first mission. We were sent north, just shy of the Canadian border. A remote firewatch station had gone dark. Local SAR teams reported an agitated male figure watching their camps from the tree line. Didn't respond to commands, didn't move like a drunk or a hiker. One deputy went missing after tracking footprints alone. Our team was told the target was a feral humanoid, possibly a drug runner, maybe a survivalist turned psychotic. We were briefed on containment procedures and issued live rounds, but warned to use tranquilizers first, if possible. But the moment we touched down, I knew this wasn't just some backwoods lunatic. The smell hit us before we even got eyes on it, like wet meat rotting in ammonia, thick enough to gag a man through a mask. The footprints weren't barefoot. They were wrong, too long. Toes curled like a primate, but heavier, deeper. We moved in formation, slow. But every time we thought we were circling it, we realized it was already behind us. It didn't act like prey. It didn't even act like a predator. It studied us. We finally cornered it just after dusk, 500 yards below the firewatch tower. It stepped out from behind a birch tree like it had been waiting. Naked, but not human. Arms to its knees, back curved like a hyena. But what I remember most were the eyes. Set wide apart, low on the skull, like it hadn't evolved with us in mind. When the light from my scope hit them, they reflected amber, like an animal, but it didn't flinch, it just grinned, wide, and then it ran. It didn't charge, it mocked us, flashing in and out of view, dragging us deeper into the valley, separating us like a damn wolf pack. When we did finally put it down, it took 3 direct hits to the chest. Didn't even bleed the way it should have. Thick, black fluid, like motor oil and blood clotted together. And as it died, it let out this sound. Not a cry, not a scream. It was layered, like more than one voice coming out of the same throat. And I swear to God, one of those voices laughed. We burned the body. We weren't ordered to. We just didn't want it left in this world. That was my first job. The debrief took 6 hours. The next morning, they handed me a check for $15,000. No questions asked. And then they handed me another file, another location, another creature. That's when I realized these weren't just animals. They were wrong, as if they were built for something we weren't supposed to survive. And yet, that first kill, that wasn't the worst, not even close. Because the thing we found in grid 24, it didn't just hunt. It remembered. And somehow, it had waited for me. People ask me sometimes, the few who know enough to ask, what was the scariest one? And I always give the same answer. It wasn't the first, it wasn't the fastest, it wasn't the ugliest. It was the one that remembered my name. But before that one, there were dozens. And most of them, they were what we called clean hunts. We're talking tactical operations. In, outside, no witnesses, no press, no body left behind. The first few years, I thought we were making a difference. Cleaning up messes the government couldn't admit existed. Keeping the borders safe in ways most people would never imagine. Let me walk you through a few of them. Because it matters, you need to understand what we faced, what we beat, and why Red Creek broke all the rules. Let's start with the Dog Man. Yeah, I know. Sounds like a YouTube campfire tale, but I've put two of them down. Both in Kentucky, different counties, same anatomy, tall, almost 7 feet. Digitigrade legs like a wolf, arms too long, claws thick as railroad nails, and fast. God, they were fast. They moved like they were skipping time. We'd see them at 2 o'clock, blink, and they'd be gone. Gone, but you'd still hear them breathing behind you. We learned real quick. You don't track a dog man. You let it think it's tracking you, and you bait it. High-caliber rounds to the chest work, but it takes accuracy. We had one guy, Haywood, Emtador Nembisau, Tiwer Forbad. A whole clip into one and only hit the damn thing in the ribs. It didn't flinch, tore half his face off before we dropped it. Clean operation, 4 hours, recovered the body, burned the site. Then, there were the Skinners. If you're from the deep woods, parts of Oregon, northern Arizona, pockets of Maine, you've heard the stories. Voices in the trees. Sounds like someone you know calling for help. But when you follow the voice, the tracks just disappear. These weren't creatures in the traditional sense. They were mimics. Small, maybe 5 feet. Pale, no eyes we could see. Just skin stretched too tight across the bones and mouths that were too wide. Like they'd never stopped smiling since the day they crawled out of whatever pit made them. We found our first Skinner near Mount Hood. A family had gone missing, left their campsite still warm. We tracked movement through the trees for 6 miles before we realized it wasn't moving away from us. It was circling. You know how we took it down? Thermal vision and absolute silence. They don't see like us, but they hear and they learn. The one we killed was luring us using a child's voice, recorded, looping. We found a little pink shoe in its gut, still laced. That night, none of us slept. But it was clean. We got it. No civilians harmed. Another file closed, another site sterilized. Then came the tunnelers. Hairless, skeletal things. They moved under the dirt like moles, but faster, like jet streams through the soil. You wouldn't know they were there until the ground collapsed beneath your feet. They never surfaced unless they were feeding. And when they did, it wasn't to kill, it was to maim. They'd pull you under and snap every bone before dragging you deeper. We lost 2 men in Tennessee that way. Never found more than their helmets and a radio soaked in blood. Tunnelers don't play. You don't fight them with rifles. You fight them with charges. You collapse the tunnels and hope they were in them when it went down. 3 confirmed kills in 6 years. That's how rare they were, and how hard they were to survive. We kept score. We ran missions like they were war games, and to most of the brass, that's all it was. Another anomaly to tag and bag. Another payday. But none of them, not the Dogmen, not the Skinners, not even the tunnelers. None of them prepared me for Red Creek. Because Red Creek wasn't a hunt. It was a warning, a place we were never meant to step foot in. A place where something waited. Not for food, not for territory, but for us. Specifically, it was like it had seen the teams before, and when it saw us, it didn't run, it didn't strike, it watched. And that's when I realized, whatever we were chasing out there, it already knew what we were. And it had been waiting a long time. That was the last time I ever said, "This will be quick." That was the last mission I came home from with both eyes closed and both hands steady. If you think you've heard horror stories, you haven't heard this one. So keep watching. Subscribe to MindFuel because these aren't campfire tales. These are files, real operations. And every time we upload, you get closer to knowing the truth they buried in the woods. The call came through on a Tuesday. I remember that because I'd just gotten back from a cleanup in Oklahoma. Tornado damage had unearthed a nest of something we still haven't classified. 3 days in the mud, no sleep, just the sound of insects crawling out of dead soil. I was running on fumes when my handler called. Didn't even say hello. Just 2 words. Red Creek. I'd heard the name before. Most of us had. It was the kind of place that got passed around in briefing rooms and cautionary tales. Patch of mountain wilderness tucked along the edge of the Bitterroot Range, Montana side. Federal land, off-grid, no trails, no permits issued. If a zone like that's closed to the public, there's usually a reason. Red Creek had a dozen. They flew me to a decommissioned ranger station outside Missoula. Briefing took place in a room with no clocks, no phones, and no smiles. Just 5 chairs, 5 folders, and a man from the Department of Interior who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Here's what we were told. 14 people. Gone. 6 days. No trace, no gear left behind, no signs of animal attack. Except for one thing. Blood. Found 20 feet up in the trees. Spattered in arcs, like it had been flung. Not dripped. Not clawed, thrown. Whatever did this, it was fast, strong, and tall. The Rangers were the first to investigate. They were pulled out after 2 days. One of them had what they called a psychological event. Showed up barefoot at a diner 70 miles south, covered in scratches and rambling about a thing with no mouth that could still scream. He couldn't describe what he saw, but he drew it. And, let me tell you, I've seen 100 field sketches in my life. This one? It didn't look drawn. It looked remembered. Long arms, no visible face, fingers that draped, not pointed, and legs that didn't quite bend the way they should. Then came the satellite footage. They pulled up infrared flyover from the last 72 hours. Most of it was static, clouds, tree canopy, heat haze. But in the gaps, you could see it, tall, spindly, moving upright, too fast, too fluid, between clearings, never in full view, always one frame from being seen. We asked for species classification. They gave us nothing, just a code name, Variant Echo. That's all. No photos, no intel beyond range estimates. All they said was, expect new behavior, likely a new variant. I glanced around the table. 5 of us, all experienced, all been through hell, but none of us had heard of a Variant Echo. And that silence between us, it wasn't fear, it was something colder. It was the realization that we were being sent into a situation where they didn't even know what we were dealing with. One guy asked if we had air support. The handler laughed, quietly, said, "No fly zone still in effect, you're going in on foot." We geared up in an old garage behind the station. Everything was black labeled, new issue gear, pre-packaged, no markings. They even gave us prototype comms units, short-wave burst devices that only transmitted in 15-second encrypted pulses. Why? Because something in Red Creek had been interfering with long-range radio, distorting it, replaying chatter from other missions, on loops. I heard it myself. A snippet of a man screaming, "Pull me out, it's looking right at me." Cut off, looped again. Same panic, same breath, and we hadn't even left the staging area yet. Before we dropped, they made us sign the usual waivers. No liability, no family contact, and one new clause I'd never seen before. Subject may demonstrate cognitive interference. Maintain visual discipline. Do not respond to auditory hallucinations without team confirmation. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a hunt. This was a test. We were the probe. The next morning, we flew low, chopper blades slicing the fog above the tree line. Red Creek came into view like a scar in the forest. No animals, no movement, just trees packed so tight the sunlight looked afraid to land. As we fast roped down, I looked up through the break in the canopy and saw that the birds had stopped flying. You want to know when a forest is wrong? It's not the smell, not the cold, it's the quiet. The kind that doesn't belong to nature. The kind that feels like something is holding its breath. 5 of us landed that morning. One of us wouldn't even make it past the first night. And I wouldn't come out the same. MindFuel is where this story lives. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't fiction. It's just the kind of truth people aren't ready to hear. Subscribe if you want more than stories. Subscribe if you're ready for what comes next. We landed just before dawn. The light barely touched the canopy. What little came through hung there like it was second-guessing itself. 5 of us, boots in the mud, gear tight, no chatter. We moved southeast through a dry ravine. What should have been teeming with birds, insects, anything, was dead silent. That's not metaphor. There was nothing. No ants, no tracks, not even scat. The forest was clean in a way it shouldn't be. Not from nature, from removal. By 800, we were 10 clicks in. No signs of struggle, no remains. But the air had changed. I noticed it first, a copper tang clinging to every breath. You ever smell an open artery in a war zone? That raw iron scent that punches straight through your nose into your memory. That's what Red Creek smelled like. Not rot, not decay, wounds. Like the forest itself had been opened up. We followed the scent east and crested a ridge. That's when we saw it. A pile. Maybe 20 feet across. Stacked high. Bones, fur, antlers, all wildlife. Elk, foxes, coyotes, even a bear, all piled together like firewood. And every single one of them. Their faces were gone. Not eaten, not ripped, removed. Sliced off like masks, clean and deliberate. I knelt next to a raccoon, what was left of it, and ran a gloved hand across the skull. No claw marks, no bite radius, just smooth separation. That's when Reyes started driving behind me. He was tough. Infantry, before he joined us. I'd seen him laugh through broken ribs in Kansas. But this shook him. "I don't like this," he muttered. "Whatever did this, it's not feeding." He was right. There were no organs missing, no signs of predation, just display, like it was making a point, like it wanted to show us what it could do. We logged the location, snapped photos for the report, and started moving again. West, now, toward where the satellite had last picked up movement. The fog rolled in around 9:30. Thick, fast. It crept through the trees like it was being pushed from somewhere deeper. We switched to thermal, kept formation tight. 5 meters spacing, no one trailing behind. Reyes was rear. He'd just started to say something. I think I saw move him, and then he was gone. No sound, no struggle, just silence where a man should have been. We froze. I spun around, weapon up, HUD scanning. Reyes, say again? Nothing. Reyes, you copy? Then the radio clicked. His voice came through. But something was wrong. It was calm. Too calm. Guys, I'm okay. Just, come find me. We looked at each other. Morrison was already shaking his head. That wasn't him. The cadence was off. The way he said, guys? Reyes didn't talk like that. He cursed. He cracked jokes. That voice? It was like it had practiced how to sound like him, but hadn't earned it. Another click. Same voice. I'm just through the fog. I can see you. You're close. But he wasn't. Thermal showed no signature, and we couldn't see more than 10 feet through the mist. I lowered my weapon. That was a mistake. Reyes, say your wife's name. Silence. Say her name. The voice came back, but not as a reply, as a laugh, a low, raspy, garbled mess, like a bad radio transmission played backward. Then the fog pulled back, and we saw the footprints. 2 sets, one normal, Reyes' boots, the other not, too long, too thin, no treads, like it had copied what a foot should be, but never walked on one. They led off the trail, into the trees, and then disappeared, like the earth itself had sealed behind them. We searched for 6 hours, no trace, no gear, no blood, no body, just a man's voice on the radio that wasn't his. We set up camp that night with a perimeter and 0 fire. Nobody slept. Not really. We kept hearing twigs snapping just outside range. And once, just once, Reyes' voice came through again. It's warm here. You guys should come. But it was colder than hell. And none of us moved. Whatever had taken him. It wasn't one of the things we'd hunted before. This wasn't feral. It wasn't instinct. It was performance. And it was just getting started. There's more. And it's only going to get worse. If you've made it this far, you already understand. This is not entertainment. This is evidence. Subscribe to MindFuel and don't miss what's coming next. Because in the next chapter, we go deeper, and the forest starts answering back. We should have pulled out that night. After Reyes, after that voice on the radio that wore him like a costume, we should have called for extraction and burned the grid behind us. But that wasn't an option. Command said to maintain position. Do not break contact with the target zone. That's the phrase they used. Target zone. As if we weren't already the targets. The fog came in again around 0300, only this time it didn't feel natural. It didn't creep. It collapsed. Dropped over the treetops like a curtain being pulled across a stage. We were locked in tight. Couldn't see 5 feet. Flashlights reflected off the mist like we were inside a mirror. Then the gear started failing. First the comms, static burst, then silence. Then the thermal. Flickered in and out like it was shorting, not from use, but from interference. Even the GPS glitched. We had a trail overlay on our HUDs, synced to movement. But now, it kept pulling us in a loop. No matter which direction we walked, it told us we were heading north, even if we turned around. Morrison tested it. He carved a mark into a tree with his trench knife. We walked east for 20 minutes, compass dead, terrain unfamiliar, and there it was. Same mark, same tree, even the same chip of bark he'd pulled off at the base. That's when the fog started making noise. First, the forest. Branches swaying, distant footsteps, but no, no, say, the mimicry. We heard Reyes again, but not on the radio, behind us. Footsteps, heavy boots crunching the leaves, identical cadence to Morrison, same spacing. It matched him, step for step. Every time he paused, it paused. We spun in formation. Nothing, just white. Then Conrad, our sniper, went rigid, said, "What the hell is that?" He lifted his NVG goggles slowly, and that's when he saw it. At the edge of view, something tall, standing perfectly still between two pine trunks. It wasn't moving, but it was leaning forward, like it was listening. No eyes, no features, just a shape that suggested the wrong kind of life. It shifted. We didn't run, we moved, controlled, deliberate. Tight circle, guns up, following the GPS, even though it meant nothing now. 10 minutes into our movement, Conrad stumbled, dropped to a knee, started breathing heavy. We thought he was hurt. Then he said, "It's my boot." I crouched down, looked, and froze. His right boot, still laced, still on his foot, was dry on top, but soaked underneath, like he'd stepped into something alive. I tapped the sole. It squished, and then I saw it. A line, thin and red, slowly leaking from between his laces. The boot wasn't broken. Something had gotten inside it. We cut it off right there. Inside was nothing. No wound, no bite, just blood pooled under the arch, as if something had bled into his boot, without touching skin. Conrad didn't say a word after that, not for the rest of the night. Around 04:30, we stopped to regroup. We hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, and something had been following us for hours. Then the radio crackled again, but this time, it wasn't Reyes. It was me. "Mercer to command. No visual, moving southeast, I'd copy that." My voice. Same intonation. Same phrase I'd used 2 days ago when we first entered the ridge. Only I wasn't speaking, and neither was command. We froze. The voice continued. "Negative contact. Tracks appear fresh. Something's ahead." I remember saying those exact words. Exact. It wasn't copying our speech. It was replaying our memories. Then it stopped. Silence. Until we heard it. Drip, 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 blood from above. We looked up. Pine branches maybe 20 feet high. Dripping thick red lines. Slow and steady. No animals. No signs of a body. Just droplets, as if the trees themselves were bleeding. It landed on Morrison's faceplate. He didn't flinch, just reached up and touched it with his glove, stared at the red, said nothing. We didn't say anything after that either, because we knew. We weren't being watched anymore. We were being walked through something, step by step, like rats in a maze. Where the exit wasn't escape, it was understanding. And whatever had been luring us through the fog, it wanted us to see something. You've just heard what most people will never know. That's why we built MindFuel. Not for the stories, but for the truth buried inside them. If you're still here, it means you're ready. Subscribe, and be ready for what we uncover next. We didn't sleep. We didn't speak. We just kept moving, letting the fog herd us, because we knew now. This thing wasn't hunting us. It was directing us. And that's when we found him. It was nearly 600. The fog hadn't broken, but the trees started to open into a clearing. At first it looked like trash, like someone dumped gear in a heap. But as we got closer, it was uniform. Tactical webbing. Boots. Patches we recognized. Conrad stepped forward, then he stopped cold. Said nothing. Just stared. I came around the other side. And that's when I saw what was left of Hale. He'd been missing for a day, slipped out during perimeter watch. We assumed the worst, but we didn't think, not this. He was alive. Somehow. Flat on his back, head tilted toward the trees. Breathing shallow, ragged, but real. But his eyes were gone. Not gouged, not crushed, removed. Surgically, clean. And his vocal cords. His throat was a mess of bruised tissue and open flesh, like something had reached in and taken the sound from him. He looked up at me. He knew who I was. He was still in there. Morrison bent down to check vitals, and that's when we saw it. A branch behind his head. Long, split, blood dried into the bark, carved into it, not scratched, not written, carved with something sharp and deliberate. You're next. No initials, no signs of who left it. But I don't need to tell you what that did to morale. We evac hail, activated the beacon, got no reply. But within 15 minutes, a drone circled overhead, then left. That meant someone was watching. Still no extract. So we did the only thing we could. We set a trap. We picked a choke point near the old ranger trail, where the fog thinned just enough for visibility. Claymores rigged with pressure sensors, a grid of flares, and 2 of us posted in the canopy, with long-range thermals and overlapping sightlines. We didn't speak, didn't breathe more than we had to, just waited and waited. Hours passed, then movement. South tree line, tall, slow, deliberate. We thought maybe a bear, but then it turned, stood upright. It walked right into the open, no cover, no urgency. And then it did something I will never forget. It looked at us, not scanned, not searched, looked. It had no eyes, not the way we understand them. But it tilted its head like it knew exactly where we were hiding. And then, it stepped into the grid. Claymore clicked. The thing stopped, looked down. Then, and I swear to you on everything I've ever loved, it smiled, wide, crooked, slow, like it was learning how. That smile wasn't a threat. It wasn't even amusement. It was instruction, as if to say, this is what your kind does. Explosions, traps, fire. Let me show you how pointless all of that is. Then it lifted its arm, longer than any human's, and pressed the trigger plate. The blast hit center mass, fire, smoke, shrapnel tore through bark. We rushed the site, and all that was left was the remains of our trap. And a thin trail of blood. Dark, almost black, leading away. No body, no footprints. Just one final impression in the soil, deeper than the rest. It had been kneeling, watching us, letting us think we had a chance. And then it vanished. We didn't sleep that night. We didn't move. Because now we knew it wasn't showing us what it could do. It was showing us what it had already done. And we were next on the list. You're not watching this by accident. You're watching because part of you suspects the world is much darker than we've been told. That's why MindFuel exists, to bring that darkness to light. Subscribe now. You're going to need to know what comes next. I don't remember the blast, not all of it. Just the pressure, the way it turned the world to liquid, like gravity folded sideways, like time stopped giving a damn. One moment we were 5, then 3, then 2, then just me, dragging what was left of my body across wet earth. Conrad had been the one to trigger the fallback. He didn't flinch, didn't ask. He just opened the case, flicked the cap off the detonator, and said one thing before pressing it. Tell them this thing wasn't local. Then he was gone. The whole south quadrant, fire, dirt, pieces of us torn into the canopy. And the thing? It didn't scream. It didn't even stagger. It just stood there, past the tree line, its shape rippling like a heat mirage, as if the blast hadn't even touched it. And then it walked away. Calm, unbothered, like it was done with us, like it had shown us enough. I don't know how I made it out. I remember crawling, fingers digging into moss and stone, blood in my eyes, teeth loose in my mouth. The evac beacon was 200 meters north, through an old ranger trail barely wide enough for a bear. I didn't see it at first, the signal strobe, but I heard it, that low, electric hum, the one they only activate when extraction has been authorized or when cleanup is incoming. I had no radio, no gun, just mud in my throat and the taste of metal that wasn't mine. And I crawled. Every push forward felt like a mile. My ribs were cracked. My left ear gone. And my leg, I never got the full report on it, but something about how it bent told me it was no longer part of me. I collapsed just shy of the beacon, laid there staring up at the clouds, thinking about Hale, about Reyes, about the blood dripping from trees, about that thing, smiling. That's when the comms flared. Short burst, encrypted, but I still had one ear and enough brain left to listen. I asked the question that had been growing in me since day one. "You're making more of them, aren't you?" Silence. Then a voice. Not one I recognized. Not command, not civilian, flat, genderless, almost too calm. It said, Now, forget what you saw. Then the line went dead, and the beacon went dark. A minute later, I blacked out. They pulled me out 2 hours later. Chopper never touched the ground. They winched me out like debris. Medevac to a base that doesn't show up on maps. They patched me up. Sort of. I've still got nerve damage. Still got the limp. Sometimes I can't sleep unless I hear radio static in the background. They told me I was being discharged. Honorable. I laughed until it hurt. 20-year NDA, no press, no graves, no questions, just signatures and silence. That was 19 years, 11 months, and 16 days ago, and today, that agreement expires. So I'm telling you, not because I want revenge, not because I want closure. I'm telling you because they're not done. That thing at Red Creek, it wasn't the first, and it sure as hell wasn't the last. You think you're safe because you live in the city? Because you keep your lights on? Because you've never stepped off a marked trail? Let me be clear. They don't care where you are. Because they're learning. Every operation we ran, every species we cornered, everything we put down, they watched, they remembered, and now they're evolving. If I disappear after this, so be it. But you've got my voice, my records, and if you've listened this far, subscribe to MindFuel. Because this is just one file. There are dozens more. And some of them, they make Red Creek look like a practice run. You still there? Then you should hear this part too. 3 months ago, something showed up in the declassified dump. They never meant for us to see it, but a few pages slipped through, marked Project Widowmaker. That was the name they gave Red Creek. Officially, it never happened. No bodies recovered, no incident logged, just a field report, redacted, and a single line typed at the bottom of page 6. Specimen displayed no signs of terrestrial evolution. Not native, not known, not from here. Then came the update, dated 2 weeks later. Target not terminated. Escaped perimeter. Last satellite trace shows southward movement toward geothermal regions. Geothermal. That means heat. That means life. That means Yellowstone. So if you ever find yourself out near the park, if the air turns metallic and the trees go quiet, don't call for help. Just run. Because that thing out there, it wasn't killed, just lost. And it remembers faces. MindFuel will return. Volume 2. What Waited Under Dulce Base. Coming soon. Subscribe now, before they bury the next truth.